Ji, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is your lecture number 5, following this investment and growth chapter. So this is your lecture number 5, agriculture sector of Pakistan. And following this investment and growth chapter, like this chapter is really important for the countries like ours, because the agriculture sector is a backbone of most all developing economies. And being a developing economy and being a country that's depending on this agriculture sector for so long, this sector's performance a lot, like our performance depends a lot on the performance of this sector. So this agriculture sector of Pakistan, we have got a huge agriculture sector in our country. And over the years, basically, although its contribution in the GDP is falling, but still like the dependence of the people, on the farm or non-farm incomes is not falling. Because the majority of the export industries that have developed over the time are also somehow dependent on this agriculture sector. Like say, for example, the biggest export that we do is of textile. And of course, it is agro-based. And similarly, there are so many other industries that basically based on the inputs from the agriculture sector. So we cannot, although the contribution of this sector has fallen into the GDP over the years, but its importance has not fallen anyway because of the great dependence of Pakistanis people, in terms of employment, in terms of exports, earnings on this agriculture sector. So a majority of the developing economies are depending on this agriculture sector, because majority of the developing economies are actually in the initial phases of their development. All the developed countries that are now actually have become developed were at certain point of time also dependent on agricultural sector, but somehow they transited from the agriculture sector to the industrial sector. And now basically they are actually from the industrial sector to now the services sector. So all the big economies are have changed their dependence from this agriculture sector, then on industrial sector, and now they are depending on the services sector. They are basically serving the whole world and earning quite a lot of money. Like even the India, although it is a developing economy, but actually it has got also a very big service industry, and this actually provide the back office for all over the world, countries. So if you look at the distribution of the people who live in those So if you look at the estimates, according to one estimate, over around 80% of the world's extreme poor and 75% of the moderate poor reside in rural areas. It's a big number. The poorest people live in the agriculture, the basically, in the rural areas, and the majority of the rural areas depend on this agriculture sector or farm income. So it actually is really important if you want to deal with the poverty issue, which has been the part of all SDGs or before that MDGs. And the world has set these parts, but if the world actually really want to improve the lives of the poor people, they will have to improve the areas of the rural areas, and they have to improve their agricultural sector performance. So for example, in China, 69% of the poor are rural, and in India, 78% are rural. So it's a big majority of the people who live in the rural areas. And if you look into Pakistan's look at the rural population in Pakistan, that has over the time is continuously increasing. And of course, the percentage of the total population in the rural areas is falling, but still the size is increasing. If you look at the size of the people in the rural areas actually is increasing, although the percentage of the people in the rural areas is falling. Like if you see here, this is also a moderate fall, but still the people actually, that actually also an alarming thing, because so many people are moving towards the urban areas, and we have not been able to develop more urban centers. So things basically are getting worse in the urban centers as well as the rural centers or the rural sectors or the rural centers of the country. Look at this. This is the annual percentage change. This is, of course, falling over the years in the rural areas, but somehow that is also a bit alarming, because since people are not living in the rural areas, they are moving towards the urban areas. And since we have not developed so many urban centers, so whatever urban centers we have got, these all people are increasing the burden on the already existing very few urban areas. So the both things basically have got its own implications. If you look at the world's population, a rural urban population from 1960 to 2020, you can see, like, that the rural population all over the world uh, is falling as compared to the rate actually of the change in the rural population is lower than the urban population since at least 2006 2007, but still, like, the number is not continuously falling. It is also rising. And also, like, this is showing that since early 2000s, the pressure on the urban centers is also rising, because majority of the people are moving towards the urban centers. And in the developing countries specifically, we have when we have got very few urban centers, like say for example in Pakistan, we don't have got many urban centers. So whatever the population is moving from the rural areas, they are coming to already burdened up urban centers. Like say for example Karachi is a city of like more than 35 million people. It's of course, like, it is not counted properly. It has not been counted properly in the census, but whatever the number basically even has been counted, the available facilities are also not enough for them, let alone this 3.35 million people actually who are living in the urban center of Karachi. So and the rural population somehow is increasing. And why we are studying this about the rural population, because the majority of the rural population, like 80-90% of the rural population, depend on agriculture. And the 80 and 90% of the people who are living in the rural areas are poor. And so their livelihood depends on the agriculture sector. And they basically, like, if the agriculture sector suffers, overall poverty rises in the country, and specifically the developing economies, that rises quite quickly. So you can raise any questions if you want during the session. Please raise your hand if you want to ask any questions, or you want to make any comment, or you want to ask, like, anything during the lecture. So please raise your hand so that I could reach you. But, like, it will be important that if you could also give your input on the things that we are talking about. Okay. So if you look at these are the references from different researchers, like Gallup et al. Basically, 1997 reported that they have done their research on the agriculture sector, and they have reported that every 1% increase in per capita agricultural output led to a 1.61% increase in incomes of the poorest 20% of the population. So if a country really wants to help poor population, if a country like us basically really want to improve the lives of the poorest of the poor, they will have to improve agriculture sector. Like according to research conducted by Gallup et al., 1% increase in the per capita agricultural output lead to around 1.61% increase in the incomes of the poorest 20% of the population. So this means that development in the agriculture sector, growth in the agriculture sector directly benefits to the poorest of the poor. And we as a government should be looking for this, and we should be trying to improve if we want to improve the lives of the poorest of the poor, we will have to improve the agriculture sector. So Turtle et al. Basically concluded from a major cross-country analysis that on average, every 1% increase in agricultural yields reduce the number of people living on less than $1 by 0.83%. So Kailash, do you want to say something? Kailash, your mic is getting unmute, please. So if you could take care of your mic. So Turtle et al. Basically concluded that from a major cross-country analysis that 1% increase in agricultural yields reduces the number of poor people living on less than $1 a day by 0.83%. Again, if somehow countries want to reduce the poverty, they will have to improve their agricultural sector, specifically the developing economies. And another research basically shows that broad-based agricultural productivity growth to do something about it. So okay, so broad-based agricultural productivity growth raises incomes of the poor farm households, as well as households of land-less laborers who primarily depends on agricultural wages. You can see that how important this agriculture sector is. Okay, so again, if you look at the importance of agriculture sector, and this, like, say for example, like this agriculture sector does not have got only the direct relationship or the direct impact on poor, but this also has got very much indirect relationships with the poor and poverty as well. The most important pro-poor linkage is generated by the effects of agricultural productivity growth is on the food prices. You can imagine that when you have got higher agricultural output, the food actually supply increases in the economy, and whenever the food supply increases in the economy, it reduces the price of the food. And poor people who depend on whose majority of the income is actually spent on food, they can always obviously get the benefit of it. So this is again a poor linkage of the agricultural sector. Whenever your agricultural sector actually does well, it helps you get higher productivity, higher output, and this higher output increases the supplies of the vegetables and food and all kind of things, like fruit in your country. And since the poor people, as you remember from Angel's Law, does anybody remember the Angel's Law of consumption? Does anybody remember the Angel's Law of consumption? Angel's Law of the consumption, as you remember, and you should remember that says the poorer you are, the higher is your income is spent on food. So higher proportion of your income goes to food when you are poor. Because say for example, a poor person, a person who earns, say for example, 15,000, 20,000 or 30,000 rupees per month right now, he must spend 20,000 or 25,000 rupees on food. So it goes at around 80% of his income. 80% of his income is spent on food or food-related commodities. But as you grow rich, your income increases, and the share of the food expenditures actually falls. Like say for example, a person who earns, say for example, 500,000 rupees per month, 500,000 rupees per month, he definitely does not spend 80% or 70% or 60% or even 50% of his income on food. Like he spends on a lot of things, a lot of other things, but the proportion of the income that he spends on food is generally small. Sabi can't hear me. Okay. So, the benefits are generally largest for the urban poor and landless laborers, but even many poor farmers benefit since they are net food purchasers. And as according to the Angel's Law, if you are a poor person, you spend majority of the proportion of your income on food consumption. And if the food prices go down, that benefits everyone in the economy. So widely shared increases in income of the farmers and farming workers also reduce poverty by providing a market for labor-intensive consumer goods. So it's very important, that you have got this. You must have heard about this green revolution. During 1960s and 80s, as the technology was coming into every sector. There were research and development taking place all over the world. The world was changing, and in the 1970s and 80s, the world was also opening, and the technologies and ideas were being shared between different countries. And this transformation of technology and introduction of technology also, impacted this agricultural sector performance. so much technology was introduced in the agriculture sector. New seeds were invented by the people, like new fertilizers, new methods of agricultural, like things basically were introduced. And this term, first of all, this term Green Revolution was used by former USA Director William Gore, like in 1968. He actually he named this particular kind of advancement into the agriculture sector as a Green Revolution. And of course, this was a necessity because the necessity of this revolution was obviously that population was increasing. As you remember, if you have done your development economics course, and if you have looked at the population growth rate, and if you look at the population explosion, what was happened, like, if we are more than we're around 7 billion people all over the world now. The first billion reached in early 1900s. The second billion, actually, the world achieved in 1950. And from 1950 to 2000, 4 billion people were added to the overall population in the world. So population was increasing. The needs of this agriculture sector, or food income, food products was increasing. So the scientists introduced these all green varieties, and they actually increased or they improved the high yielding seeds. They introduced high yielding seeds. They introduced high yielding and high performance, other kind of things. The machines were introduced into the agriculture sector. New fertilizers came, new seeds came, and these seeds were more productive. These all chemical, fertilizers were more effective and more quick in production of the goods. And also, you have seen, like all over the world, a lot of advancements have taken place in the agriculture sector. Like, you must have heard about GM foods.
Sir, you mean genetically modified foods?
Hear me now? So this Green Revolution was, of course, introduced to fight this famine problem into this China. And China was facing this very huge problem. I mean, many millions people died. Many million people died in China during that particular famine. So at that point of time, that was quite needed to introduce this kind of technology in all over the world. Pakistan also got benefited with this Green Revolution. And this, again, another paper by Akmal Hussain, we are covering, and we are just actually learning that what actually are the findings of this particular paper, the Green Revolution in Pakistan. And this technology enabled a 3-4 increase in output of food grains between 1967 and 1992, thereby accelerating economic growth, of course, during that period. And due to this technology, new variety of seeds were introduced that were called HYV, high yielding variety of seeds. Chemical fertilizers were introduced, new kind of irrigation methods were introduced. And but that also was not very much pro-poor. What is your view about it? Like, say, for example, how do you think that would have impacted Pakistan's agriculture sector, the introduction of this high yielding variety seeds and this Green Revolution? What is your view that how should have this impacted, or how do you think that has impacted the performance of the agriculture sector in Pakistan? Will anybody Pakistan as well? Like, say, for example, what? Yes, please.
Sir, is it because people are more aware and they're switching to more organic?
So, the Green Revolution in Pakistan increased income inequality more. Why that increased income inequality? Because at that point of time, if you look at the majority of the people who performs or does this agricultural activity, majority of the farmers are poor. Very few farmers actually have got big lands and they have got so much money So when this new technologies came, and of course these technologies were expensive, these technologies require a lot of money to for the farmers basically to have those all technologies. So every poor farmer was not able to buy these high yielding variety seeds, and they were not even able to buy this all chemical fertilizers because of the shortage of money they had. So that basically also increased kind of income inequality in Pakistan. So you should be knowing about that, although this green revolution is quite important, and this green revolution actually has got a lot of impact on the world's poor all over the world. But like in Pakistan, this also increased income inequality because of the affordability of these seeds, affordability of these all technologies. Only the rich farmers, the already well-off farmers, were able to get the benefit of it. So Pakistan's, in the context of Pakistan's agrarian structure, this was to have a profound economic and social and ecological consequences, and that was something is explain you. Maham can't hear me. Are you people able to hear me? Maham says I. So this revolution has had a lot of impact on society, on ecology of Pakistan. Like say, for example, the large landowners attracted by high profitability made possible by with this high yielding variety technology, and they basically were able to get the benefit, and they were able to get the profit, from that all developments. Now, this Pakistan has got a lot of very good plans. There was a plan given by Nawaz Sharif's government in 2014. That was Vision 2025. And this Vision 2025 was about water, energy, and food security. Food security is also very, very important, aspect of this agriculture sector and the countries, because if you have got more people who are food insecure, and if they get they don't get proper food, or they are very much vulnerable, that with very small kind of interruptions or distractions or a kind of economic shock, they actually are not able to get food. So there are so many people who don't have got the food security. So this food security was also added into this vision, and the availability of water, energy was also added to this. And this was the 12-year vision in 2013-14 that was introduced, and that was 2025 vision, that where they want to see Pakistan in 2025, it had got 7 pillars and set several quantitative targets under each pillar. So there was an ample time available to PML and government to work out these targets. However, of course, Nawaz Sharif's government could not achieve any of them. They on the energy as well. They have been able to create more energy, but they have not been able to create any transmission mechanism of that energy. So whatever energy is being produced at points, basically that becomes burden on the national exchequer, because the IPPs that were called during that time independent power producers to create energy, they have been called on the promises of capacity payments. So they basically are being paid according to the capacity they produce or they are working on. They are not actually paid on the basis of the provision of that electricity to the people. So they produce more energy and they basically get so much money, which actually generally is not of use for Pakistan, because Pakistan has got energy, but they don't have all the transmission mechanisms in place. And that was also a kind of a problem that Pakistan is still facing. Still, even after this 3-4 years, Imran Khan's government has not also been able to create that transmission mechanisms properly, so that we could get the benefit of that energy as well. So, but Pakistan's Vision 2025 recognizes that sufficient, reliable, clean, and cost-effective availability of energy, water, and food is indispensable in ensuring sustainable economic growth and development. Okay, Gibran, I will. Okay, so specifically, we are concerned with food security. According to the UN's Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO, this food security concept is flexible. but is widely believed to exist when all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food, which meets their directly needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. Again, if I recall you the first speech which Imran Khan made after taking the office of Prime Minister, he mentioned he was carrying some pictures of brains of the people or the children, basically, which were not fully developed. And that was actually he was talking about the stunted growth. And this stunted growth is the direct result of malnutrition of the children and the mothers who gave birth to those children. So you can imagine, that what kind of proportion of the population in Pakistan having this stunted growth. Like Pakistan's labor is not able to perform in the international markets or the locally because of so many factors. And one of those factors is that their brains have not developed fully. And their brains basically have not been able, they have not been able to develop their brains fully. Like, say, for example, a rich person can afford formula milk. A rich person can afford other kind of nutritions for his or her children. And during the pregnancies as well, the mothers can take very good care of them. They can take nutritious food. They can actually take care of their diets if they are only able to afford it. But you can imagine that how many of the women in Pakistan are able to afford that kind of luxury during their pregnancies. They are not able to get enough food. They are even just forget about this nutritious food. They are not even able to get enough food to live healthy, in those environments. So this food security is a very, very big problem. This food security is linked with all other kind of performances in all other sectors of the labor in Pakistan. If the people actually have people's mind are not fully developed, they will not be able to have any kind of contribution into the development or the growth of Pakistan. So major dimensions of this food security include food availability, which so many people are lacking in Pakistan. Even the poor people who actually have got mainly who are performing the activities of agriculture, they are still not able to get enough food to meet with the demands of the whole year. Food access, how many people have got access to good food, stability, and utilization. They are all basically the major dimensions of the food security. So if you look at the food security provincial wise, say, for example, if you look at different provinces in Pakistan, that is a bit old survey, but this is the latest survey available for this food insecurity in Pakistan. If you look at these bars are divided in different kind of colors, and the blue color basically shows this food secure, red shows mild insecurity, the yellow shows moderate insecurity, and green shows severe insecurity. So not surprisingly, which province is having the most, the second highest food insecurity is Sindh. Although Sindh has got very good and very big urban centers, and specifically Karachi. Karachi is the biggest urban center in Sindh, which could take care of the whole province, and which could, if was developed on the right scales, should have basically created a lot of advantages for everyone. But if you look at this food secure in the Sindh and you compare it with the other provinces, even we are actually equal to the Balochistan. The Sindh is equal to Balochistan if you compare the ratio of the people who can be termed as food secure. And if you look at Gilgit-Baltistan, you look at KP, you look at Azad Jammu and Kashmir, you look at Punjab, and you look at overall Pakistan. So you can see that the Pakistan, the Balochistan and Sindh provinces are struggling. And we have got very smallest percentage of the people in our population who are food secure. So this is alarming. Balochistan has got the biggest proportion of the people who have got severe insecurity. So as Sindh basically is doing a bit better than Balochistan in terms of the percentage of the people who are severely insecure, but still that we are comparing Sindh with Balochistan only. We cannot compare it with KP. Look at the food severe insecurity in KP. It's a very small percentage. Similarly in Gilgit-Baltistan, and similarly in look at the Punjab and look at the overall Pakistan. But if you look at the food insecurity, severe insecurity in Balochistan and Sindh, you will see that these both provinces are almost alike in terms of the people who are food secure and the people who are not food secure. So this should show you the performance of the respective governments in these provinces. You can imagine that how these provinces basically have been governed over the time and how the resources of these provinces have been utilized, because majority of the resources that have been plundered and have been misused or have been looted by the people who are governing these provinces. So things basically the benefits of these growth in those areas and in those provinces is not going to the poorest of the poor. So many people still are food insecure. So if you look at the food assistance fact sheet of Pakistan, this is from the USAID website, September 30, 2019 report. This was a report published by USAID, and this actually tells that Pakistan has produced food, but the more poorest and the most vulnerable people in Pakistan cannot afford a sufficient and nutritious diet. It's a very, very big problem for Pakistan that the people in Pakistan are not able to afford sufficient and nutritious diet despite the overall growth in food production. And the reasons are, what do you think? What are the reasons that people, even though we are producing a lot of food, and I'll be showing you the current statistics, which will be showing you that how much production we have been able to make in the area of agriculture, in different crops in Pakistan, and still you find so many people struggling to get affordable, nutritious diet for themselves and for their families. Do you know why is this so? Yes. So we were talking about that, although Pakistan has been able to produce a lot of food, but still majority of the people are not able to afford or get the sufficient food because of the illegal smuggling, because of illegal exports. We have seen that during the last few years, we have seen that how crisis in sugar has triggered. And this crisis was not a natural crisis, that was a crisis that happened because of this mismanagement on the part of the government and the role of mafias in Pakistan. So the similar things happen, whatever sugar we produced during those years, we actually exported to them to the other countries, and then we imported back to them. And that actually is something is a big game that was played with us, and billions of rupees were earned by these all big mafias who somehow were able to get the advantage of first exporting them. They exported themselves. They earned the forex reserves, forex money by exporting that money, and then they import. And for that import, they get the subsidies. And that basically is something that basically happens and keep happening all the time in Pakistan, that Pakistan has been able to produce a lot of food, but that food is somehow smuggled or sold abroad illegally, in the sense say, for example, if you don't have got enough food to meet with your local demands and still you are exporting them, that basically is a crime. So chronic poverty, recurring natural disasters, protected instability, and humanitarian access challenge persist in some parts of the country. And that is what basically is observed by USAID during 2009 report. And following the 2008 May to August monsoon season, Pakistan has experienced acute shortage of water, food, and water due to rising temperatures. And there was some kind of a climate cycle actually happened in the Pacific Ocean. So that also had got impact on Pakistan. So again, this report further explains that the GOP government of Pakistan estimated that a drought has affected around 5 million people in 26 districts of Pakistan because of that kind of problems in Asia Pacific. So additionally, severe drought-like conditions emerged over much of the southern Pakistan. And of course, they are expected to worsen through 2023. There are some kind of problems. Nearly 17,000 vulnerable Pakistani families are displaced in KPK because of so many problems. And now basically this problem is aggravating because of this situation in Afghanistan. Majority of the people with strong relationships with the people like, here in Pakistan, they are moving to Pakistan, and they are increasing the pressure on the availability of these all things to the poorest of the poor. So if you look at the chapters excerpts from Akbar Zaidi's book, Issues in Pakistan Economy, chapter number 5, you can consult that chapter if you have got that book. So according to this particular chapter, in 1949-50, the agriculture was by far the largest sector, contributing more than 53% of GDP. Now it is contributing less than 20%, around 18% into the GDP. But at that point of time, that was contributing around 53%, but more than half of the GDP was depending on the agriculture sector. In 95-96, this share went down to around 24.8%. Over the time, Pakistan, of course, that is not a bad thing. Why is not the bad thing that contribution of the agriculture fell into the GDP?